In this episode of the Growth Engine podcast, I'm delighted to be joined by Rick Cannon, the Marketing Director for EMEA Campaigns at AllianceBernstein. With a distinguished career spanning over 2 decades, Rick has developed and led marketing strategies across several leading financial institutions, including BNY Mellon, JP Morgan, and Schroders. Known for his expertise in digital-first campaigns and strategic capability development, Rick has a proven track record of driving brand growth and innovation in highly competitive markets. Join us as Rick shares insights from his journey and discusses the future of marketing in the financial services industry. Rick, thank you for coming down and joining us today.
Thank you for having me.
Could you kick us off by giving us a bit of background to what led you to your current role at AllianceBernstein?
Yeah, absolutely. So I moved to London 20 years ago, straight after uni. I studied marketing at uni. I always knew I was going to go into finance and business, but I'm not a maths person. So marketing, advertising were kind of where I looked at uni to progress to. Moved here 2004, and then I basically 6 months later started at BNY Mellon before it was BNY Mellon.
Right.
So I joined there to help with institutional marketing across EMEA. Coming from Australia and being 21, I had to learn pretty quickly that every single market is very different. But I also didn't know anything about finance, talk about equities and fixed income and anything else like that. And I had no point of reference, so I had to learn all that pretty quickly. I was there for a couple of years before the merger with BNY took place. So my role was still doing institutional marketing, which then had to move into kind of brand management and brand refresh across EMEA. At that time, we're talking 2005, 2007, 2008, it was all press advertising and not really moving into the digital space. I was there for about 4 or 5 years and then went to JP Morgan Asset Management, where I moved into the UK intermediary team. So again, it's still an American company, but working in a regional office. And this time now having to learn about financial advisors, discretionary. And around that time, you're looking at the shift into more digital marketing and the kind of emergence of social media. So it was an interesting opportunity where I got to start with institutional and brand, but then go into intermediary and product. So I was there for 8-ish years before going to Schroders. So I joined Schroders initially to look after strategic capabilities, which if you think of as asset class marketing, equities, credit, multi-asset, but with some client needs in there like income, retirement, sustainability. And I guess my role there was really coordination across all markets that Schroders was present in, but what was the narrative for each of the 10 areas? How does it differ between institutional, intermediary, and ultimately end consumer? So learning that kind of third segment within financial services. A lot of that was around coordination between marketing, sales, product, investment to help define what each of those strategic capabilities were, but also roll those out globally. You can't talk to an institutional client the same way you talk to a retail client versus an end consumer, but you have to have the same starting point. So I did that for a few years at Schroders, but my role started to shift a bit more into the campaign side of it.
Okay.
So not necessarily just the narrative, but also then how do you activate that? So for example, how do you activate with a Japanese institutional client versus an American institutional client? It's the same narrative you're telling, but it's activated and in a very different way. And my focus there for my last few years there was around predominantly sustainability and private assets, which I think we'll come on to the sustainability campaign shortly. And was there for about 5 years before recently joining AllianceBernstein, where AllianceBernstein, my role there is that campaign coordination, but predominantly across EMEA. And I think AllianceBernstein's coming from a slightly different starting point as to where Schroders was. So that brings us to
up to present day
right now.
A couple of points there I just want to drill into a little bit more. So I think when you said at the beginning that you had to kind of learn pretty quickly about the I guess the product sets, the services that asset managers offer, coming into that space, it can initially seem very, very complex. How did you kind of close that gap rapidly? And you did it twice. So you started on the institutional side and then went over onto the intermediary side. So
Yeah.
any kind of, advice for people new into the industry?
Do you know what I would say to anyone? Be upfront with that. Every interview I've gone to, because I didn't touch on, there was a 6-month company in there as well that was around FX and crypto.
Okay.
But be upfront. I've said it in every interview, right from when I first moved to London, like, I don't know these products. I don't know what an equity is or a fixed income product is, but I'm willing to learn. What I do bring is those marketing skills.
Yeah.
And also when I start the job, if someone says something I don't understand, I will put my hand up and say, sorry, could you just explain that to me? One of my favorite activities, or one of the favorite things that I did with some fund managers at JP Morgan, was we were writing an absolute return brochure for end consumers. And I said to them, like, every time you use a word, I'm going to play the end consumer. Every time you use a word I don't understand, I'm going to ask you to explain it. So they said, this fund can go long. I was like, what's that? Like, okay. So, you're buying a share in Apple. I'm like, great. And it's like, and it can also go short. I'm like, oh, so is that selling a share? And you could just see their face drop. They're like, I think this is going to take a bit longer than we thought it was going to.
Yeah. So it is. I mean, it's full of jargon, the industry, isn't it? And especially now for in consumer stuff, consumer duty, you're kind of being asked to double down on that. But a lot of people just don't realize this. We're all innate in our own biases with that jargon. So
and ultimately, whether it's institutional, intermediary client, and consumer, everyone's still you're just people.
Yeah.
So you've still got the same 3 seconds to grab someone's attention on social media. So if it's something seems too complicated or too technical, mentally you kind of glance at it. I don't understand that. I'll just move on to the next thing. So it's trying to treat people like people, whether that's through promotion or even just when you start a job. Other people start jobs and they don't understand things. So why can't I ask the same questions?
Yeah. The second point that I wanted to ask about is that you said different audiences you speak to in a different way. And within my career, I've only really done marketing for retail or intermediaries, never really institutional. So just for my knowledge, can you give me a bit of an overview of how is the marketing different within the messaging to institutional versus the other two sets?
I'd say more and more the messaging, I'll probably rephrase my earlier statement in that case. The messaging probably is more similar across the audience types. The activation is probably more different now than it used to be.
Okay.
They used to be, if I think back to when I started at BNY Mellon, and even when I was at JP Morgan, institutional clients are really clever. They like 50-page PDFs and they like to watch 2-hour webinars and they want data and they want that's true. Some probably do, but they also don't. They also like to watch funny videos on YouTube.
And they're also time poor.
Well, exactly. And so I think that's kind of the shift in since we've moved to more social, digital, video-led creatives or content. The activation is different. Obviously, institutional clients have certain publications that end consumers don't visit. But again, it's about short consumable pieces. Like I said before, you've still got the same few seconds to grab someone's attention. To your question, do you speak to them differently? I guess the only real difference is you can use some more of that jargon with institutional clients. You do run a risk with certain types of institutional clients where they can feel like they're being talked down to. But I would say in the most people just want something that's easy to consume.
Yeah.
Because every other asset manager or financial company is trying to get their message in front of this same client. So yours just has to cut through. And if you're all just being very technical, is that creating any cut through?
From my perspective, from an agency, we obviously we have the unique position that we work with multiple asset management firms, so we can see different styles. And I've definitely worked with some organizations who are, the way you talk to advisory clients very different from how you talk to retail. And I've definitely worked with some clients that go, you know what, we talk to everyone the same, and actually the simplicity of message. And I almost, from my perspective, I almost think that's more forward thinking. But I do like things explained to me in simple terms. So it could be that. I don't know. But
yeah, and particularly when you think of like newer investment types, things that I've been talking about recently, like systematic investing, and it's not. Again, people know about these things, but you don't want to assume people know about these things. No one wants to feel stupid, do they?
No. Of
so
course
you
not.
don't want to sit in a room where I start talking to you about systematic investing and you nod and pretend you know what I'm talking about when you don't. Whereas actually, if I gave you a quick, like, by systematic investing, what we mean is this.
Yeah.
Took me a few seconds, but all of a sudden you're on the same page as me, and people don't want to feel like they're missing out.
No, I mean, I'm going off on one here, but I did a research very early on with savers that weren't investors, and one of the questions we had to ask them was, "Why don't you invest?" And and they said, when we go on those websites, it makes us feel stupid because we don't understand anything. Why are you going to put your money with something that makes you feel stupid?
Yeah, and or the flip side is they put their money there, and then they're checking their investments on a daily basis.
Yeah.
Because they think, oh, investing is a quick win. It's like, well, it's not. It never has been.
Yeah.
And I think to that point, that's why we need to speak to multiple people. That's why you write pieces that are retail friendly and you activate them to different types of clients, because one institutional client will know more than another institutional client, but from a mass marketing.
Yeah.
And by mass marketing, obviously tailored, but if I'm going out to everyone, I can't bespoke everything. So I need to kind of cater for most people.
Yeah. Well, look, let's get back on track. So going back to the background, lots of different asset managers, not lots, but a number of different asset managers come over from Australia, working across different areas. When you look back on that time, what do you think are the most, I guess, the biggest challenges that you've worked on within that period within marketing for the different audience types?
I'd say first and foremost was probably BNY Mellon, going from Mellon to BNY Mellon. I'd never been part of a merger / a rebrand, let alone having to roll that out across a whole continent. That was a personal challenge for me, and not my challenges in like it was a good challenge, not as in it was challenging. But you have to learn that very quickly. I had feedback when we were trying to roll out this brand in EMEA from certain markets saying, well, we don't really like the colors or the logo, so we're just not going to use it. And I was 23, 24.
That's a lot of responsibility at that age.
Well, my manager was also obviously there, but having to be like, well, the company that it doesn't exist anymore. You have to use this, and just being told like, no, we're not going to.
Wow.
So I had to learn a lot about people too.
Yeah.
And I'd say the other kind of challenge that has popped up throughout my career in marketing is the emergence of digital marketing. More so, I started doing press advertising and events. And then went to JP Morgan, where we're still doing press advertising and events, but now we're talking about more display advertising, social media. I launched a UK advisor Twitter account at JP Morgan, which was the first asset management professional Twitter account that I'd seen globally. Right. So I was really pleased with that. And we had, I think it was about 8,000 followers when I left, which of an audience of 15,000 in the UK, it was pretty high numbers. You can't just launch a Twitter account at a big company like JP Morgan. There are steps that you have to take, and there is
compliance is a big one.
Compliance and IT risk and legal, and you need to get a lot of people comfortable of, I'm not going out there trying to sell something on Twitter. I'm just trying to get our content out in a different place where our clients are. But I guess from my side, I really enjoy that piece. I enjoy looking at new technologies in marketing, and I really enjoy the analytics piece too. So having to learn all of that, press advertising, you stick it out there, it goes on 10,000 back covers, brilliant. Whereas actually digital, you could start showing like what's working, what are people engaging with, how do you optimize, and I think that's what I've taken forward in my kind of career from JP Morgan to Schroders to AllianceBernstein is I really like the data side and I really like the digital side. And at the time it was a challenge. Back to that point on Twitter, I had someone in the team say to me when I said we wanted to do this Twitter account, oh, social media, that's just a fad. Like it won't be around for a while. But why would you think any different?
Yeah.
So you kind of spend time putting your eggs in this basket that someone next to you doesn't necessarily believe in.
Yeah.
But I really enjoy it. And if something works, that's great. And if something works from a marketing side, that's usually better, because I can then say like, hey, I tried this thing, didn't work. Why didn't it work? How do we make this like even better than what it was?
What you're describing there is a environment where you're kind of allowed to try things and fail. Were you blessed to have managers that would accept that as a way, or do you think that is fairly true of most marketing organizations or most marketing departments in asset management?
I would say I was blessed to work for companies that would let you try and fail, on the provision that you would start and say like, hey, this is what we think will happen. We're going on unexplored territory here. I don't know if that's true of all companies, but I think, in my career, I've had managers who have allowed me to do that. And that's what I take into when I manage my teams over the years. I love it when someone's like, hey, we want to try this thing, or hey, we tried this thing, it didn't work, so we're going to do it again and do this. Because I think that's the opportunity I was given. And I think that's hopefully true of most managers, but I don't know.
No. Well,
you see more.
I don't think it is. I think, I think everyone would say that that's the ideal, but I think the reality is often far from that. So, but I agree that it's given that openness to sort of say, hey, look, don't worry, don't beat yourself up over it. Let's just try something again. I think it's good and constant improvement.
And we as marketers don't always talk about the things that go wrong.
No.
And again, I would always say to anyone in my team or anyone that I work with in marketing, like, if something works, brilliant. Tell people. If something doesn't work, like, that's a bigger learning point for a room full of marketers than something that did work.
You know what? That's great, and that's advice I should heed here, because whenever I come to speak to you, the first thing I say is, tell me about something that you've done really well that you're really proud of. And actually, it'd be a great question to say, tell me about something that really blew up and you learnt from. That would be, I'll take that away.
Don't ask me that now. I don't know.
Okay. Well, let's stick to the original plan, which was, so we talked about campaigns which are challenging from a launching point of view.
Yep.
And what about something that you kind of look back and you go, yeah, you know what, that is something that I am very proud of and I can kind of talk about as best practice type of thing.
I mean, best practice is, I can talk about best practice now, but I'd say, so I'll talk through the Beyond Profit campaign that I worked on at Schroders, but it's best practice in hindsight. At the time, it was very much muddling through.
Okay.
So basically, when I joined Schroders, one of the areas I looked after was brand research, and we used a few agencies. And like I said, I looked after 10 strategic capabilities. Sustainability was one of them. So it was 10% of a focus as far as I was concerned, being a new person there. Went to the senior management meeting with the brand research, and I was like, do you know what? Globally, Schroders is ranked 23rd for sustainability as a brand attribute. And I was like, that's brilliant. Everyone else in the room thought that was one of the worst things they'd ever heard. Because Schroders is really good on the sustainability side, but British company being very British, like not necessarily wanting to tell people about it. So I think everyone in that room thought we were going to be ranked higher.
Right.
And I went back to my desk and I was like, well, I'm responsible for sustainability marketing, but it's one small part of a website. So if I don't know about it and it's part of my job, why would other people know about it? So it's just the campaign elements were there at Schroders, or the brand elements, but it was not amplified enough, probably the best way to put it. So all kind of like 2018, 2019, a lot more of my focus was around the sustainability piece and working with across people in the marketing team, but also understanding what we do from an investment side. There was a head of sustainability, so working with her and the team. It was then about how do we build the prominence of sustainability at Schroders. I'm not going to sit here and say like, hey, I did this thing by myself. Actually, it was a senior management decision, which is great when it comes top down. Of saying like, this is a brand attribute we want to be known for. So having that senior management backing is great because then everyone kind of jumps on board of it. But it wasn't just let's do this marketing campaign, let's do an ad campaign and change perception. It was, what does it look like from advertising? What's the content flow behind this? How do we create cut through? So it was around being digital first, social first. What does that look like for investment teams? What do they need to say? What's the internal training model? Because the way that you use the word sustainability and I use it might be different. So how do we make sure everyone's using the same terminology across the building? It took a while. These things don't happen overnight. But actually, what's the brand framework and the narrative? And how does that apply to institutional, intermediary, and consumers? How does that work in 37 countries? So it's really like mapping out all of this.
How do you go about answering? So you've got a lot of questions there.
Yep.
That you need to go and find out. So you're here in this room.
Yep.
You've gone bang 37th, and that's gone down like, not the intended way. Presumably they said we would much rather be at XYZ number. I don't know. Let's say
top 5 was the goal.
Oh, top 5.
Top 5 over 3 to 5 years.
Okay, so that's a big move.
Yeah.
So how do you go, right? That's the objective, to go from there. You want to those different characteristics. It's got to work in 37 countries. It's got to work across digital. Yeah. That's fine. You've got to make it like that. But how do you actually work out how to get there? What's the underlying strategy? How did you tackle that?
And again, this is where it becomes a combination of people and teams of
getting their heads together around a drawing board.
Yeah, and we've got this goal. Okay, well, this goal is top 5 over 3 to 5 years. Brilliant. Okay, well, we know what our ranking is with institutional and with retail. So you can see what the ranking is globally. You can see it by region. You can see it by country type. Where are we strong? Where are we less strong? So getting those different stakeholders in place. Like I said, it wasn't just a marketing campaign. It was across the business. But you've got people who experts at writing content. So I'm not sitting there and going, hey, I know what to do here. I don't know the answer. Actually, I can coordinate people and help coordinate people who do know the answer, because we've all got a goal now. Now let's break this down into what are the steps we need to take to get to this goal.
Yeah, almost what can you contribute to help us move along this journey?
And I would say, and this was my first time when I was at Schroders, kind of moving to a global role, is it was also about getting local teams engaged right from the start or near the start. I think I've seen companies before where they launch a campaign and they say to be honest, I've been on the receiving end of it at American companies where it's like, hey, here's this campaign, it's launching tomorrow, you need to do stuff with this. And by the time it reaches you, you're like, I can't use that. My clients won't like that. The message doesn't land here. The spelling's in American spelling. So my role was also coordinating across the local teams to get their input. Now, some countries have more kind of prominence than other countries because strategically and tactically they're priorities. Some countries and regions knew more about sustainability versus some that didn't really care about sustainability. But you have to understand all those nuances and get everyone coordinated and pulled together. Because as you said, like I'm not going to get everyone, I'm not going to move from 23rd to top 5 overnight.
No.
So I need to make sure everyone's involved along the way. And actually by getting everyone engaged, it really helps like kind of form that narrative and the activation of it and the socialization of it with country heads. And actually we launched the campaign, now you're testing me, 2021, I believe. Could be 20. It was around COVID time.
I know it was around COVID. So I was just for full disclosure, I was in the room at the agency briefing of Beyond Profit.
Okay.
So I was invited in, and I remember that it was because we all had all the seats were
in the
separated.
auditorium.
Yeah,
of course. And so that but then
it felt very different. That whole setup. This was it was being launched by Schroders with a kind of quite a bit of fanfare. I think everyone felt very, very proud of it within the business.
But and again, not just a marketing team being proud of a campaign.
No.
You could have asked anyone involved, a fund manager, what are we doing? What's Schroders doing? And they had an answer for it because they'd been brought along that journey.
Yeah.
And then by the time, so I finished up Schroders 2023. I think by the time I finished up, Schroders was ranked 5th globally for sustainability.
So it achieved its objective.
So I was like, well, I'm done.
Brilliant.
But that was
drop.
Yeah, but that was over. That goal was set 2020 to happen over 3 to 5 years, and it happened because of the research cycle within 2.5 years.
Congratulations. That's fantastic.
So when you talk about accomplishments, I mean, that one, I don't know how many meetings I had talking about sustainability. One of my old managers at Schroders used to call me Mr. Sustainability.
Right.
And just because that was all I was talking about. Yeah. Probably a good year.
Yeah. Well, it should have only been 10% of your time.
Yeah, exactly.
I do remember it. So it felt so visually different and felt very bold. And we're an agency. We were charged with implementing it. I think we were the first agency to actually put a implementation. It was a promotional video. So you've probably seen it.
I've probably seen it at least 5,000 times.
Yeah. But we loved it, and because it felt so vibrant, very global.
Yeah,
the way that you had all of the specific uses for how faces were to be used with the lens logo. It was beautiful.
And it was, again, because we had that top down kind of push on it. It was. We could have easily have just said we want to be in line with what our peers are doing.
Yeah.
But we're like, no, we need to go beyond that. Which is why Beyond Profit came, because we know as an asset manager, we still have a fiduciary duty to make our clients profit, but actually we need to talk about like, here's the stuff you get on top, and here's why it's important to us as a business. And so straight away we were like, no pictures of wind farms and forests. Like, we don't want green advertising and just green banners across the website, because this isn't about a section of a website where, hey, we do quite well. This is about, it's ingrained in our brand. It's about the people and the planet and our impact on that.
Well, you must have felt quite proud then because you did this pre FCA guidelines on greenwashing. So you must have felt very proud about when those guidelines came out and go, you know what, we actually did it right the first time.
We ticked the box as well. I think there was, the guidelines come out, and I think probably every asset manager was like, okay, quickly, let's just see what we're doing versus what our requirements are. But that was it. And then back to my point, we weren't leaning into, hey, everything we do is sustainable investing. That was an area of it. We were like, what is the impact on brand? What are our differentiators? Like, what are our strengths? What's the impact on product? We had 3 tiers of a campaign that you could dial up and down based on what your clients know and based on who you're talking to. I think that's probably, it was a lot of work, again, not just by me, by a lot of people.
Yeah.
But it was such a proud moment when that gets launched, and brand research showing you like, actually, we did this.
Yeah.
Like, we did move the dial.
Yeah. It's a fantastic achievement, and good legacy to have. It must have been hard work, kind of saying goodbye to that piece. You've mentioned that you kind of embrace trying new things. You embrace the challenge of whether that's new technology coming out, new marketing technology coming out. Within marketing, we seem to be awash at the moment with MarTech, and it seems to be ever growing. How do you kind of approach the integration of that into your strategic work in a world that seems to be accelerating with the volume of products and technology on offer?
You've mentioned MarTech, you mentioned it, but there's also ad tech, there's sales tech, there's so many different platforms that on a daily basis email them like, hey, you should come speak to us.
Your inbox must be, you're constantly getting invitations down to the Excel Center or somewhere.
Yeah, exactly. Take me for lunch and maybe.
No,
I think it's about kind of being realistic and breaking it down. I've embedded, again, not just me, but teams people, embedded platforms over the years, or MarTech over the years. Company comes to you, they sell you something, it gets put in place, and we're like, great. And then everyone as a company moves on to the next thing.
Yeah.
Whereas actually it's about taking that step back and being like, okay, well, what can this platform do? And how are we using it? And if you take some of those bigger platforms, they could probably do 100 things. But if I came to you and said, like, hey, here's this platform, it's in place, it can do 100 things, go. You're not going to look at it. You're not going to do any of them. Whereas what I found over my career is to work out the one or two things that are relevant for now and introduce that. So this platform can do 100 things, but at this thing, we're about to do this email campaign, and we're going to use this platform to help us with this small part of it.
Yeah.
And then you can show, through analytics and data, like the success of that small part. And that, do you know what? Let's just add that to all of our campaigns. That's brilliant. Like, small change, we can get that done. The next thing you're launching, you're like, okay, well, that same platform can also do this. And hey, that worked really well. Why don't we do this? So you kind of attach MarTech and attach change to the things that people are working on in their day-to-day business.
Almost incremental change.
Yeah, because new technologies, it's not scary, but it sounds like more work.
Yeah.
And if I take it back to, it's not even talking about new technology, but something like paid search. When I was at Schroders, not many of the countries were doing paid search. And it's not because they didn't want to, it's because 35 countries, 20-ish people, paid search sounds scary. You talk about ad copy and you talk about keywords and how accounts are structured and all the different jargon around it. And people understand, like, yes, I need to do this, but they don't know how to do it. And it's like, well, I could get 20 people around the world doing this in 20 different ways, or my team can help coordinate this once, get the input from the local teams to kind of review bits and pieces, and then we can embed that from a central point. And it's kind of, it's an example of, like, we're making a small change and it's not adding days worth of work to 20 people.
Yeah.
It's adding 15 minutes of work or half an hour's worth of work. And then I can show you the impact. The second some paid search launched in some of these countries, a month later, they're launching a campaign like, what do we do with paid search? How do we make sure that this is attached to our campaigns?
So it's piece by piece rather than just trying huge global company-wide digital transformation projects.
Yeah, and I mean that can work at other places. I'd just say in my experience, it's always been, there's incremental changes. Because over the years, over 20 years in marketing, we've gone from centralized marketing models to decentralized, back to centralized, decentralized again.
Yeah.
And now I think recently, and I say recently, probably over the last 5 years, you start hearing more about centers of excellence. Because not everyone can know everything. So, and other people more clever than me are being paid to be more clever than me.
Yeah.
So it's like, well, you're the expert. You tell me. Let's work together.
I'm going to take us back again. I seem to be constantly taking us back rather than moving forward, but in a weird way, going back, move forward. You mentioned about that same message perhaps needs to be delivered in different ways across different markets, activated different ways across different audiences. When you're working across, you've worked globally in your roles, now you're over EMEA Campaigns. I'm interested to understand how marketing messages resonate with different diverse audiences across different regions and different audience types. How do you start mapping that out in order to, make sure that everything resonates?
Yeah, I guess a couple of things. There's always, again, getting the local teams involved straight away.
And what does that entail?
It's conversations. It's picking up the phone and saying, hey, we're doing this thing. And we're doing this thing because it's a strategic, like it's a strategic priority, or someone senior is like, hey, this will be our, there's a tactical opportunity for this promotion right now. So it's engaging with people to say, like, hey, we're going to launch this thing in a few months.
Value your feedback.
Yeah, there's no impact necessarily on you right now, but I'm telling you now because in a few months, hey, you're going to have to look at translations, or you're going to have to review certain bits and pieces. Yeah. So preparing people. I think at that point when you've started that engagement piece, like, okay, well, how can I help? Yeah. Then when you look at the messaging, and again, using whether Beyond Profit at Schroders or even more recent pieces I've done, any campaign narrative, and by campaign, again, I don't mean just advertising, it could be content, whatever it is it's not me saying to you, like, here's this thing that is 100% like
Done.
locked down.
Yeah.
You have to use this. It's about crafting a central narrative of, hey, this is this brand attribute we want to be known for, or this is this product and these are the key differentiators. So the way I've always talked about it is like the 70-30 model, where it's like 70% is the core narrative, but that 30% can be flexed locally when it comes to activation or the messaging.
Right, nice.
Because I don't know the difference between a French institutional client and a French intermediary. Like, I know they are different, and I know they consume different media, but there's someone sitting in France who knows that. Like, that's their role, so they should know that.
Do you see that as your role to seek out that input?
Yeah, I'd say it's input's a hard one. Input, or at least kind of
Feedback.
Yeah. I think that's the balance you have to play. If you take Schroeder's 37 countries, if you've got 37 people inputting into something,
the old too many cooks.
Yeah, you end up saying nothing.
Yeah.
Because if I asked every single person's opinion, then what, someone wants to play it safe over here, and someone might write this really compelling.
You get
piece.
into trying to please everyone and ending up with something bland.
Yeah, a wind farm.
Yeah.
So I think it's mapping out who needs to be involved.
Yeah.
Centrally, locally. There's setting out the framework, and I think the other thing that I've always talked about is that kind of 3 tiers of campaign. So what does it mean at a brand level?
Yeah.
What does it mean at strengths? So what are our differentiators? And what does it mean at a product level?
Yeah.
And I think if you think of a campaign, may not have to tick all those boxes. If you're going a product campaign, obviously you just focus on product. But if you think of those 3 levels when you're planning, it's like, okay, in APAC, they don't know us for sustainability because it's not this. I'm talking a few years ago. They don't know us for sustainability because of XYZ. It's not a focus of their market. So we need to go in and say, like, we're a sustainable brand. Whereas and again, hypothetically, in France, they already know that we're sustainable and they think that we're a great brand, but they don't necessarily know the products. So you go in with a product campaign. But all 3 of those tiers need to talk to each other. And that's where you have those local kind of flex that I've not just given you one headline that you have to use. I've given you a range.
Yeah.
And you decide what's important for your
It's
clients.
almost a toolkit that they get type thing.
Yeah.
So that's interesting. So can you give us a bit of an overview of your role now and what you're currently working on at AllianceBernstein?
Yeah. So at the moment, I've been there 4 months. So I've kind of been brought in to do what I was doing at Schroeder's, but at a EMEA specific level.
Yeah.
I think it's a very different starting point where we are. I think AllianceBernstein's got channel marketers in place. They've got a focus across EMEA and the UK, but it's trying to really understand what processes are in place and how we can be more efficient. And you see it in a lot of companies, like if you've got teams of people who are kind of grown organically, they don't necessarily think of like, hey, I'm doing this thing. How do I do that on behalf of someone else? So I've been brought in to kind of help coordinate those processes. Some of the things we're working on, like there's a couple of products that we're looking to launch or that have been launched that we need to put some marketing effort behind. But they're at the point where they've only recently launched. Most financial advisors won't consider a product in the UK until it's got 1, 2, or 3 year track record. It's got a certain amount of AUM invested, and these products don't necessarily have that yet. So we need to come in at a kind of content first, digital first level where we can just start talking about these things.
Yeah, but almost like a pure awareness raising game.
Yeah, so that when it does hit that track record, people go, okay, now I know this product exists.
Yeah.
So there's the product level. There's also working across the central teams here and in other parts of the world of what brand attributes do we want to be known for. But like I said, I'm 4 months in, so
Yeah. It's interesting. It's interesting that kind of how you enter into a position. You're a senior marketer. You've worked at marketing on a number of different stages, and it's interesting that kind of like first, what's on the job list on that first year almost, and what are the thing. Part of that, I guess, is learning where the business is and learning what are the most critical challenges that you can help with right now.
Yeah, and that is trying to save people's time, because if I can save people's time doing X, Y, and Z, it means that they can start doing A, B, and Z.
Yeah.
And most of that time saving is just about like, well, this person's really good at this, so why don't we let them lead this part? And this person's really good at that, so why don't they lead that part? Rather than both of you trying to do both parts and struggling your way through.
Have you got your crystal ball with you? This is sort of the tricky question. It's always interesting. Future of marketing in financial services. Where's it going from your position? You clearly keep your finger on the pulse of what's going on in the technology space. So, what are the tips for us mere mortals?
Do you know what? It's like I mentioned before. Like over the 20 years, we've gone from centralized, decentralized, back and forth. So it is about finding probably those experts in different areas to help lead things, lead projects. I think fundamentally, you're looking at things like AI coming in and different social platforms, which I'll talk about in a sec, but you can't have 100 marketers around the world trying to learn AI in 100 different ways. Actually, you need some people who can focus and really be like, well, this is this new technology. Like, how do we adopt this? How does this make our lives easier? So I think first is that kind of, we're looking at streamlining processes across marketing. The analytics piece, I think, is strong in marketing, but could be stronger. I think we're very good at reporting data, but we don't necessarily report like goals first. Like, hey, we're doing this because we want to do that, or we want to see this. And then if I think of some of those emerging kind of pieces, social, programmatic, all that type of, that's constantly evolving. If you're specifically talking about financial services, I don't see any asset managers jumping on TikTok anytime soon. But we have to be aware that it exists, because asset management is an industry that's been around for a long, long time, and your future clients are there. So at some point, it's going to have to happen. But what's that tipping point? Talking about the AI piece as well, I think people see AI as, and again, I'm talking from my experience here, it's kind of like, oh, it can help me write a piece of content, which is great. Like, it can help. But that piece of content, and I did go to an event, I can't remember who said it, was, AI can help you write something, but every single asset manager has access to that exact same tool. So I can be like, write me something about US equities. If everyone does that, you're all saying the same thing. So actually, there's still no cut through. So it's about what's your opinion? What's AllianceBernstein's opinion on US equity? So you've got these experts. So embracing AI of like, hey, this can help us with the starting point, but actually we need to have our input and like, what are our differentiators here? And what I'm using AI for in marketing is, if I need to write a brief for creative, I kind of know what I want to write, but I don't know the best way to write it. Or similarly, we're looking at like images aligned to a campaign. So It's not an advertising campaign, but we want to have like some visual cues to tie it in together.
So almost looking at using for ideas generation.
That's exactly that. So, and then things like translations and the stuff that is happening but could be more efficient.
So, but you sound like you're very, very clear, which is so refreshing to hear about. These are the elements where AI I'm comfortable in, but the stuff where actually we need to be, company specialists on, which is our opinion, and the stuff that we're actually paid, our experts are paid for. Let's make sure we keep that very much human. Is that?
Yeah, that's exactly it. And I think that is the right way of thinking of it. Like, this is not meant to be this challenge for us. It's actually supposed to make part of our lives a bit easier. And two portfolio managers at the same company will have different views on a stock, because that's the nature of having two different funds. So if I said something like, let's write something generic, I'm missing that human element. the other thing from a time saving point of like, if I need to summarize something into a social asset, again, it may not be the final output, but let's say I need to write something for LinkedIn and I've got 200 characters. I can write a really comprehensive prompt for AI. It can come back with 20 ideas. And then I can be like, oh, I like this. Like, let's explore this a bit more.
Then I'll go with that.
Yeah. Or what I probably used to do was sit there for half a day and be like, okay, I need to come up with a few ideas. And it's now saving me hours worth of work.
Yeah. It's that, again, it's that sort of ideas generation type thing, which it's fabulous. I use that a lot. In that respect.
And someone, again, another event I went to was like, you just need to, particularly with some of these prompts, like, tell AI like, hey, I want you to be like a creative agency here, and this, or I need you to be like, an end consumer who doesn't understand these things. So I need you to so tell it like who it should be
to help to get critique or
to help you get that response. Otherwise, I think by having that prompt at the beginning, it does help kind of get you a bit more focused too.
So just to sign off here, what were your favorite AI tools that you would recommend marketers go and explore?
Oh God. I just use Google Gemini as a starting point for a lot of things.
Yeah.
I mean, I've explored things like, we looked at DeepL for translations, for example, which benefits from machine learning. HappyScribe for platforms to do subtitles, and then they do like transcriptions, but they do summaries, and people use ChatGPT, Google Gemini, whichever one. The reason I like Google, and I'm not going to say that ChatGPT and those can't do this because I don't know, but Google, I've built up a profile of prompts, so it kind of knows me.
Okay.
I am a member of a running club, and we write like blogs for the running club. So I'm like, hey, it's me again from the running club. Like, can you help tidy this text up?
Right.
So it's just because I've given it enough prompts over time that I feel like it knows.
So you've invested the time in it. That's also clever, isn't it?
Particularly like I like the creative agency piece. Like, hey, I want you to be a creative agency. Like, I want you to be like really safe for a few of these headlines, but then I want you to be like really bold that like my compliance team might be a bit scared of. But it's good because then it gives you those ideas.
Yeah. Brilliant. Rick, thank you so much for joining us today, sharing your insights. I wish you all the success in the time at AllianceBernstein.
Thank you very much.
4 months in, we'll watch the space. Thank you.
Cheers. Thank you.
Thank you for listening today to The Growth Engine. If you enjoyed this episode and like to hear more, please do subscribe wherever you get your podcasts from, and follow us on LinkedIn for regular updates or on hubagency.co.uk. Thank you, and see you next time.